I thought I had the perfect life, a loving husband, a fulfilling career as a nurse, a beautiful home. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true? I never imagined my life would take such a dramatic turn. Looking back, I can see the signs were there, but at the time, everything seemed perfect. Well, almost perfect. One day, I noticed something off. A strange scent on my husband's clothes, secretive phone calls, sudden business trips. My world started to crumble, and I found myself doing things I never thought I would. You know how they say ignorance is bliss? Well, let me tell you. Once that blissful ignorance starts to crack, it's like a dam breaking. I became a detective in my own home, uncovering lies that threatened to destroy everything I believed in. But this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens after, when you're forced to look in the mirror and decide who you want to be. Watch out, world. Sarah Thompson is coming back stronger than ever. But here's what I'm still trying to figure out. When your entire life is built on a lie, how do you find the strength to start over? And more importantly, who will you become in the process? I never imagined my life would take such a dramatic turn. Looking back, I can see the signs were there. But at the time, everything seemed perfect. Well, almost perfect. My name's Sarah, and I've been a nurse at Memorial Hospital for over a decade now. It's a demanding job, but I love it. There's something incredibly fulfilling about helping people when they're at their most vulnerable. My husband Michael and I have been married for 10 years. He works as a sales manager for a big tech company, always chasing that next big deal. Our life together was comfortable. We had our routines, you know. Every morning, I'd wake up early to get ready for my shift. Michael would stumble into the kitchen, bleary-eyed, reaching for the coffee pot before I could even say good morning. I'd laugh, kiss him on the cheek, and head out the door. In the evenings, we'd take turns cooking dinner. Michael wasn't exactly a chef, but he made a mean spaghetti bolognese. We'd sit at our little dining table, talking about our days. He'd tell me about the clients he was trying to win over, and I'd share stories from the hospital, the funny ones, not the sad ones. No one wants to hear about that stuff over dinner. We had our plans, our dreams. We talked about starting a family, maybe buying a bigger house with a yard. Michael would get this excited look in his eyes when he talked about teaching our future kids how to play catch. I'd roll my eyes and remind him that our hypothetical children might prefer dance classes to baseball. He'd laugh and say, "Why not both?" I remember this one night, about a month before everything changed. We were curled up on the couch, watching some cheesy rom-com. Michael turned to me, his face all serious, and said, "You know, Sarah, I don't think I tell you enough how much you mean to me." I was surprised. Michael wasn't usually the sentimental type. "Where's this coming from?" I asked, half joking. He shrugged, looking a bit embarrassed. I saw how you were with that old lady at the supermarket today. You know, the one who couldn't reach the top shelf. You didn't hesitate, just went right over to help her. And then you spent 5 minutes chatting with her about her grandkids." I blushed. I hadn't even realized he'd noticed that. "It was nothing," I said. But Michael shook his head. "It wasn't nothing. It's who you are. You're always thinking of others, always ready to help. It's one of the things I love most about you." I felt my heart swell. It was moments like these that made me feel so lucky, so loved. I leaned in and kissed him, feeling like the luckiest woman in the world. Little did I know our perfect little world was about to come crashing down. But in that moment, curled up on the couch with the man I loved, everything felt right. I thought I knew Michael better than anyone. I thought our love was unshakable. God, I was so naive. But you know what? I don't regret it. I don't regret loving him with my whole heart, because that's who I am. I give everything I have to the people I care about. And even though it ended up hurting me, I wouldn't change that about myself for anything. So yeah, that was my life. Nurse by day, loving wife by night. I had my job, my husband, our cozy little home. I had my friends at the hospital, our game nights with the neighbors every other Saturday. I had my morning jogs and my weekend volunteering at the animal shelter. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I knew exactly where my life was headed. Boy, was I in for a surprise. It was just another Tuesday when my world started to crumble. I didn't know it then, of course. Isn't that always the way? You look back and think, that was the moment. That was when everything changed. But in the moment, you're just living your life, oblivious to the storm that's brewing. Michael had been away on a sales conference, 3 days in some fancy hotel, schmoozing with clients and making deals. He'd called every night, telling me how much he missed me, how he couldn't wait to get home. I'd missed him too. It's funny how you can be with someone for so long, but still feel their absence when they're gone. I was in the kitchen when I heard his key in the lock. My heart did a little flip, the way it always did when he came home. Pathetic, right? 10 years of marriage and I still got butterflies. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, his voice warm and familiar. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and went to greet him. He looked tired, his suit rumpled from the flight, but his face lit up when he saw me. We hugged, and I breathed in his scent, a mix of his cologne and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "How was the conference?" I asked, helping him with his bags. "Oh, same old," he said, shrugging off his jacket. "Boring presentations, mediocre coffee, too much small talk?" I laughed. "Poor baby. Well, you're home now. Why don't you go take a shower while I finish up dinner?" He nodded gratefully and headed upstairs. I went back to the kitchen, humming to myself. Everything felt normal, comfortable, like a well-worn pair of shoes. It wasn't until later, when we were getting ready for bed, that I noticed something off. Michael had just gotten out of the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist. He was rummaging through his dresser for a t-shirt when I saw them, long, red scratches running down his back. "Michael," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "What happened to your back?" He turned, looking confused. "My back." He twisted, trying to see. "Oh, that. It's nothing. We had this team-building exercise, had to crawl under some nets, must have scraped myself." It sounded reasonable enough, but something in his voice, a slight hesitation maybe, made my stomach clench. I pushed the feeling away. This was Michael, my Michael. He wouldn't lie to me. "Does it hurt?" I asked, moving closer to examine the marks. He shrugged away from my touch. "Nah, it's fine. I didn't even notice until you said something." I nodded, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. We got into bed, Michael immediately rolling over to his side. Usually, he'd wrap an arm around me, pull me close. But tonight, he seemed distant. "You okay?" I asked, staring at his back in the darkness. "Yeah, just tired," he mumbled. "Good night, Sarah." "Good night," I whispered back. I lay there for hours listening to his steady breathing. My mind was racing, replaying every moment since he'd come home. The unfamiliar scent on his clothes, the scratches on his back, the way he'd pulled away from my touch. It was nothing, I told myself. I was being paranoid. Michael loved me. We were happy. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, a tiny seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. A seed that would grow and take root, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Michael kissed me goodbye before heading to work, promising to pick up groceries on his way home. I went about my day at the hospital, pushing away the lingering doubts from the night before. But that evening, as I was folding laundry, I found one of Michael's shirts from the trip. Without thinking, I brought it to my nose. There it was again, that unfamiliar scent, floral, but with a musky undertone. Definitely not a men's cologne. I sat on the bed, the shirt clutched in my hands, my heart pounding. It could be innocent. I told myself, maybe it was the hotel's laundry detergent, maybe he'd hugged a female colleague. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew something wasn't right. And for the first time in our marriage, I found myself wondering, Do I really know my husband at all? You know how they say ignorance is bliss? Well, let me tell you, once that blissful ignorance starts to crack, it's like a dam breaking. You can try to plug the holes, but eventually, the flood comes rushing in. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Michael. It was like I was seeing him through new eyes, noticing things I'd overlooked before. The way he'd check his phone constantly, angling the screen away from me. How he'd step out of the room to take calls, his voice low and hushed. One night, I woke up to find his side of the bed empty. I padded downstairs, expecting to find him raiding the fridge or watching late-night TV. Instead, I heard his voice coming from the backyard. He was on the phone, speaking in that same hushed tone. I know, he was saying. I miss you too, but we have to be careful. My heart stopped. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more, but he must have sensed something because he quickly ended the call and came back inside. I barely made it back to bed before he entered the room. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just work stuff," he mumbled, sliding under the covers. "Go back to sleep." But I couldn't sleep. I lay there, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Who was he talking to? What did they have to be careful about? The next morning, I casually asked about the call. "Work emergency?" Michael looked confused for a moment, then nodded. "Oh yeah, client in a different time zone. You know how it is." I did know how it was. Michael had taken plenty of late-night calls before, but this felt different. The secrecy, the hushed tones. It didn't add up. As the days went by, more little things started to nag at me. Michael, who used to be a slob, suddenly started doing his own laundry. He'd come home from work and head straight for the shower, something he'd never done before. "New gym routine," he'd say with a shrug when I asked. "Don't want to stink up the house." But I never saw any gym clothes in the laundry. Then there were the business trips that seemed to be happening more and more frequently. He'd come back looking relaxed and refreshed, not tired like he usually did after a conference. One evening, as we were getting ready for bed, I decided to test the waters. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Remember that weekend getaway we talked about? Maybe we could plan it for next month." Michael froze for a split second before answering. Next month might be tricky. We've got that big product launch coming up, remember?" I nodded, pretending to believe him, but I knew for a fact that the product launch wasn't for another 3 months. I'd heard him talking about it on the phone just the other day. That night, as Michael slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, my mind a whirlwind of doubts and fears. Was I crazy? Was I seeing problems where there weren't any? Or was my husband, the man I'd loved and trusted for over a decade, lying to me? I thought back to our early days together, how we'd stay up all night talking, sharing our dreams, our fears, how he'd surprise me with little gifts, not for any special occasion, just because. When had that changed? When had we become these strangers, sleeping side by side, but worlds apart? Part of me wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but another part, a scared, insecure part, didn't want to know the truth. Because if my suspicions were right, if Michael was really, I couldn't even bring myself to think the word. If he was, then everything I thought I knew about our life together would be a lie. So I did what any scared, confused person would do. I buried my head in the sand. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts at the hospital, anything to keep my mind off the gnawing doubts. But you can only run from the truth for so long. And as much as I tried to ignore it, the evidence was piling up. The secretive phone calls, the sudden business trips, the way he'd tense up when I asked about his day. Something was wrong in my marriage. And sooner or later, I was going to have to face it. I remember sitting in the break room at work, staring into my coffee, when my friend Lisa plopped down next to me. "Earth to Sarah," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay? You've been a million miles away lately," I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired. You know how it is." Lisa gave me a long look. "Sarah, honey, I've known you for years." This isn't just tired. What's going on? For a moment, I considered telling her everything about the phone calls, the trips, the gnawing feeling in my gut that my marriage was falling apart. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud, because saying them would make it real. So I just shook my head and changed the subject. But as I left work that day, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, in this limbo of suspicion and doubt. I needed answers, and one way or another, I was going to get them. You know that saying, what the truth will set you free? Well, let me tell you, the journey to that truth can be a real nightmare. Once I decided to stop burying my head in the sand and face whatever was going on in my marriage, it was like opening Pandora's box. I couldn't stop myself from looking for clues, analyzing every little thing Michael did or said. I started small. When Michael was in the shower, I'd quickly scroll through his phone. Nothing suspicious in his text or call log, but I noticed he'd deleted his browser history. Michael, who could barely figure out how to change his ringtone, suddenly knew how to cover his digital tracks. That set off all kinds of alarm bells. Then I started paying more attention to his schedule. He'd always been a hard worker, but now it seemed like he was at the office more than ever. Late nights, weekend emergencies, sudden out-of-town trips. I tried calling his office once when he said he was working late. "I'm sorry," his assistant said, sounding confused. "Mr. Thompson left hours ago." I said he had a family emergency. My heart sank. "Oh, right," I lied. "I forgot. Thanks anyway." I hung up, my hands shaking. A family emergency? The only family he had in town was me, and I was very much not having an emergency. One night, when Michael said he had to work late again, I decided to follow him. I felt ridiculous, like a character in some cheesy detective novel, but I had to know. I parked down the street from his office and waited. An hour passed, then two. Just as I was about to give up, thinking maybe he really was working late, I saw him. He came out of the building, looking around furtively before hurrying to his car. My heart was pounding as I followed him through the city. He didn't go far, just to a small Italian restaurant downtown. I watched as he got out of his car, straightened his tie, and went inside. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Was he meeting a client? Or was it someone else? After what felt like hours but was probably only about 45 minutes, Michael came out, and he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, tall and blonde. I couldn't see her face, but I saw the way Michael leaned in close to her, his hand on the small of her back. I saw the way she tilted her head back and laughed at something he said, and I saw the kiss, quick but unmistakable. A goodbye kiss between two people who were clearly more than just friends or colleagues. I felt like I was going to be sick. I wanted to jump out of the car, to confront them right there on the street, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, watching as the woman got into a taxi and Michael returned to his car. I don't remember driving home. I just know that somehow I ended up back in our driveway, sitting in the dark, waiting for my cheating husband to come home. When he finally pulled in, I was ready. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, how I was going to confront him. But when he walked in the door, all smiles and, "Hey, honey, sorry I'm late," the words stuck in my throat. "How was work?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. "Oh, same old," he said, loosening his tie. "Boring meetings, difficult clients. How was your day?" I looked at him. This man I'd loved for so long, and I couldn't believe how easily the lies rolled off his tongue. How many times had he done this? How long had he been deceiving me? "My day?" I said, fighting to keep my voice even. "Oh, it was interesting. I learned some things." He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, like what?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. But as I opened my mouth to confront him, to tell him I knew about the blonde woman and the kiss, something stopped me. Fear. Cowardice. Or maybe just a desperate need to have concrete proof before I blew up my entire life. So instead, I forced a smile. "Oh, Just some new medical procedures at work. Nothing exciting. Michael nodded, clearly relieved that I wasn't pressing for details about his day. He kissed me on the cheek and headed upstairs to shower. As I heard the water start running, I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. What was I doing? Why couldn't I confront him? I had seen it with my own eyes. I quickly wiped my eyes and plastered on a smile. Michael came downstairs, hair wet, smelling of soap and shampoo. He smiled at me, that same smile that used to make my heart skip a beat. Now it just made me feel sick. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing something off in my expression. I nodded, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Everything's fine, just tired. Think I might turn in early." He nodded, buying my lie just as easily as I'd bought his for who knows how long. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I felt a strange mix of determination and dread. I was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took, and God help Michael when I did. I never thought I'd become the kind of person who spies on their spouse. But there I was, turning into a regular Sherlock Holmes, minus the cool hat and pipe. My life had become a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to catch that cheating rat. After my little stakeout adventure, I knew I needed more concrete evidence. Something Michael couldn't explain away with his smooth talk and charming smile. So, I stepped up my game. First, I tried the classic, check the credit card statements, move. I pored over every charge, looking for suspicious hotel bookings or fancy restaurant bills. But Michael was either being careful or using cash. Nothing stood out. Then I thought, hey, I watched that little dot on my phone screen move to a part of town I didn't recognize. It stayed there for hours. My heart was pounding as I zoomed in on the map. It was a residential area. Was this where she lived? The blonde from the restaurant? I was tempted to drive over there to catch them in the act. But what would I do? Pound on the door and scream, "Aha!" Besides, I still didn't have solid proof. It could be a client's house or a colleague's. The bookshelf, not a good angle. Then I spotted the perfect place, the air vent high up on the wall. It had a clear view of the whole room. I felt sick as I set it up, disgusted with myself and with Michael for pushing me to this point. But I kept thinking about that blonde woman, about Michael's hand on her back, about their kiss. And I kept going. The next few days were torture. Every time Michael's phone buzzed, I jumped. Every time he said he had to work late, I wondered if this would be the day I caught him. But nothing happened. The camera showed our normal, boring bedroom routine. Michael coming home, changing clothes, sleeping. No secret phone calls, no mysterious women. I started to think maybe I was going crazy. Maybe I'd imagined it all. The scratches, the phone calls, the kiss I'd seen. Maybe it was all in my head. Then, on Friday night, it happened. Michael said he had to go out of town for work. A last-minute thing, he said. Couldn't be helped. He packed a small bag and kissed me goodbye, promising to call when he got to the hotel. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I raced to check the camera feed. For hours, nothing, just our empty bedroom. I was starting to doze off when movement on the screen caught my eye. It was Michael. He was back. And he wasn't alone. I watched, my heart in my throat, as he led a woman into our bedroom. The blonde from the restaurant. They were laughing, touching each other with the easy familiarity of longtime lovers. I couldn't tear my eyes away as they kissed, as clothes started coming off, as they fell onto our bed, the bed where I slept, where I'd made love to my husband countless times. I don't know how long I sat there, watching this nightmare unfold on my phone screen. It felt like hours. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I shut off the feed and ran to the bathroom, barely making it before I threw up. When I could breathe again, I sat on the cold tile floor, my mind reeling. There it was, the proof I'd been looking for, the confirmation of my worst fears. My husband was cheating on me, in our home, in our bed. Part of me wanted to storm into that bedroom right then and there to catch them in the act, to scream and yell and throw things. But another part, a colder, more calculating part, held me back. No, I thought. Not yet. I've got the evidence now, and I'm going to make him pay. I wiped my mouth, stood up, and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the trusting, loving wife I'd been for so long. She was someone else. Someone harder, angrier. Someone who was about to turn Michael's world upside down. I grabbed my phone and copied the video feed to a secure cloud storage. Then I called a lawyer friend of mine. "Hey, Kate," I said when she answered. "I remember when you said to call if I ever needed legal help? Well, I need it now. How fast can you draw up divorce papers?" As I hung up, I heard the bedroom door open, footsteps on the stairs, Michael's voice, low and warm, saying goodbye to his lover. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the bathroom, time to face the music. And oh, what a symphony of chaos it was about to be. I stood there in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I could hear Michael moving around downstairs, probably thinking he was in the clear. Oh, how wrong he was. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it, the moment of truth. No more hiding, no more pretending. It was time to confront the lying, cheating bastard I'd been married to for the past decade. As I descended the stairs, I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. Was this really happening? Was I really about to blow up my entire life? Michael was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he poured a glass of water. He looked up as I entered, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across his face. But he quickly covered it with a smile. "Hey, honey," he said, his voice casual. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." I stared at him, taking in every detail of his face. The face I'd woken up to for years. The face I thought I knew better than my own. Now, it looked like a stranger's. "Sleep," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How could I sleep when my husband is fucking another woman in our bed? The glass slipped from Michael's hand, shattering on the floor. Water splashed across our feet, but neither of us moved. "Sarah," he started, his eyes wide. "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't." I held up my hand, cutting him off. "Don't you dare lie to me, not anymore." I pulled out my phone and hit play on the video. Even though the sound was off, there was no mistaking what was happening. Michael's face drained of color as he watched himself and the blonde woman on our bed. "How?" he stammered. "How did you—" "Does it matter?" I snapped. "What matters is that I know. I know everything, Michael." He slumped against the counter, looking defeated. "Sarah, I can explain. It's not what you think. She's just what?" I interrupted. "A friend, a colleague? Save it, Michael. I'm not interested in your excuses." I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to find a way out of this. But there was no escape. Not this time. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "How long have you been cheating on me?" Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere but at me. It's only been a few months. I swear. Sarah, I never meant for this to happen. It just did." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that didn't even sound like me. "It just happened. What? Did you trip and fall into her vagina?" Michael flinched at my words. Good. I wanted him to feel uncomfortable. I wanted him to hurt like I was hurting. "Who is she?" I demanded. "Her name's Jessica," Michael said quietly. "She's a client. We met at a conference and things just escalated." I nodded, taking in this information. Jessica. The blonde had a name now. Somehow that made it worse. "Do you love her?" I asked. Not sure if I really wanted to know the answer. Michael hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I don't know," he finally said. "It's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "Right. Well, let me uncomplicate it for you. I want you out of this house, tonight." Michael's head snapped up. "What?" "Sarah, come on." We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what, Michael? I shouted, all my pent-up anger finally exploding. We can pretend this never happened. We can go back to being the happy couple we never really were. No, it's over. I could see the panic setting in as he realized I was serious. Sarah, please, I'm sorry. I'll end it with Jessica, I swear. Just give me another chance. For a moment, I wavered. A tiny part of me, the part that still loved the man I thought Michael was, wanted to believe him, wanted to give him that second chance. But then I remembered the video, the easy way he'd lied to me, over and over, the months, maybe years, of deception. No, I said, my voice firm. I'm done giving you chances. I'm done being your fool. Get out, Michael, now. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged, feeling a cold satisfaction. I don't know, maybe Jessica will take you in. After all, she seems pretty comfortable in our bed. Michael flinched again, but I was beyond caring about his feelings. I watched as he slowly made his way upstairs, probably to pack a bag. As soon as he was out of sight, I let out a shaky breath and sank into a kitchen chair. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone again. I stared at the screen, at the frozen image of Michael and Jessica in our bed. With a decisive swipe, I deleted the video. I didn't need it anymore. The damage was done. When Michael came back downstairs, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he looked lost, like a little boy who'd been caught doing something naughty. Sarah, he said, his voice pleading, can we just talk about this? Please. I stood up, squaring my shoulders. There's nothing left to talk about, Michael. It's over. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. As he reached for the door, he turned back one last time. I do love you, you know, he said softly. I always have. I looked at him, this man who had been my whole world for so long, and I felt nothing. Goodbye, Michael, I said, turning away. I heard the door open and close, and then silence. He was gone. It was over. I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the shattered remains of my marriage, and I cried. I cried for the love I'd lost, for the years I'd wasted, for the fool I'd been. But as the tears flowed, I felt something else stirring inside me, something that felt a lot like strength, like hope. This wasn't the end, I realized. It was a beginning, a chance to rediscover who I was without Michael, a chance to build a new life, on my own terms. And as scary as that thought was, it was also exhilarating. Watch out, world, I thought. Sarah Thompson is coming back stronger than ever. You know how they say the night is darkest just before dawn? Well, let me tell you, the weeks after I kicked Michael out were about as dark as they come. I'd like to say I handled it all with grace and dignity, but the truth is, I was a mess. I called in sick to work for a week straight, something I'd never done before. I couldn't face the thought of putting on a brave face and pretending everything was fine. Instead, I spent my days alternating between crying my eyes out and raging at everything Michael had left behind. One particularly low day, I found myself sitting on my bedroom floor surrounded by Michael's clothes. I'd been planning to pack them up to donate, but instead, I ended up hugging his favorite sweater, inhaling his scent and sobbing like a teenager with a broken heart. It was Lisa who finally dragged me out of my pit of despair. She showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and a determined look in her eye. All right, Sarah, she said, pushing past me into the house. Enough is enough. You're going to shower, put on some real clothes, and we're going to talk. I wanted to argue, to tell her to leave me alone, but I didn't have the energy. So I did as she said, and you know what? She was right. Talking helped. Crying with someone who actually gave a damn about me helped even more. I just feel so stupid, I confessed, halfway through our second bottle of wine. How did I not see it? How did I let him fool me for so long? Lisa shook her head fiercely. No, honey, you're not stupid. You trusted the man you loved. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes him an asshole for betraying that trust. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was right. I wasn't the one who should be feeling ashamed or stupid. Michael was the one who'd broken our vows, who'd lied and cheated. That night was a turning point. I woke up the next morning with a killer hangover, but also a sense of, I don't know, purpose maybe? For the first time since the confrontation with Michael, I felt like I could breathe again. I went back to work, throwing myself into my job with renewed energy. My colleagues were understanding, offering support without prying too much. I was grateful for their discretion, even if I sometimes caught them whispering when they thought I wasn't looking. But the real challenge came when I had to start dealing with the practical side of our separation. Lawyers, financial advisors, realtors. Suddenly my life was full of appointments and paperwork. The day I met with my lawyer, Kate, to go over the divorce proceedings was particularly tough. Sitting in her sleek office, listening to her talk about asset division and alimony, it all became so real. Now, Sarah, Kate said, her voice gentle but firm, I know this is hard, but I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else I should know? Anything that could affect the proceedings? I thought about the camera, about the video I'd taken. A part of me wanted to use it to make sure Michael paid for what he'd done, but another part, a part I was surprised to discover, didn't want to stoop to that level. No, I said finally. Nothing else. Kate nodded, seemingly satisfied. All right then. Based on what you've told me, I think we have a strong case for a favorable settlement. Michael's infidelity, combined with your financial contributions to the marriage, puts us in a good position. I nodded, trying to focus on her words. But all I could think about was how surreal this all felt. Here I was, discussing the end of my marriage like it was a business transaction. As I left Kate's office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. Can we talk? Please? I miss you. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. A week ago, hell, even a day ago, I might have said yes. Might have given in to the part of me that still loved him, still missed him. But not today. Today, I was stronger. I deleted the message without replying and kept walking. The next few weeks were a blur of more appointments, more paperwork, more steps towards dismantling the life Michael and I had built together. It was exhausting, both emotionally and physically. There were nights when I'd come home, collapse on the couch, and wonder if I was doing the right thing. If maybe I should have tried harder to save my marriage. But then I'd remember the look on Michael's face when I confronted him, the easy way he'd lied to me, over and over, and I knew I was making the right choice. One Saturday morning, about a month after the split, I woke up feeling different. The crushing weight of sadness that had become my constant companion was still there, but it felt lighter somehow, manageable. I got up, made myself a cup of coffee, and stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard. The flower beds I'd planted last spring were overgrown, choked with weeds. I'd been too caught up in my own misery to take care of them. Without really thinking about it, I put on some old clothes, grabbed my gardening gloves, and headed outside. For the next few hours, I lost myself in the simple act of pulling weeds, pruning back overgrown branches, coaxing life back into my neglected plants. As I worked, I found myself thinking about my life, about the future. For the first time since the split, I allowed myself to imagine a life without Michael, a life where I didn't have to wonder about late nights at the office or mysterious phone calls, a life where I could be me, just me. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. By the time I finished, the flower beds were looking alive again, and so was I. Dirty, sweaty, with soil under my fingernails. I felt more like myself than I had in months. That night, as I soaked in a hot bath, soothing my aching muscles. I made a decision. I was done being the victim in this story, done letting Michael's actions define my life. It was time to start writing a new chapter. My chapter. I picked up my phone and dialed Lisa's number. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Remember that girls' trip we always talked about? Let's do it this weekend." Lisa's excited squeal made me laugh, a real genuine laugh, and in that moment, I knew I was going to be okay, more than okay. I was going to thrive. You know what they say about the best laid plans, right? Well, let me tell you, my plan to thrive hit a few bumps along the way. That girl's trip with Lisa, it was great, don't get me wrong. 3 days of sun, sand, and probably too many margaritas. But coming back to reality, that was a whole different story. I walked into my house, our house, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. The silence, the emptiness. Michael's absence was suddenly so loud it was deafening. I stood in the hallway, suitcase still in hand, and felt the tears start to fall. For a moment, I was right back where I started, broken, lost, wondering how the hell I was going to move forward. But then I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror, tanned, a little hungover, but with a spark in my eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I thought, no, I'm not going back there. So I did what any rational, mature woman would do. I cranked up some angry breakup music and had a one-woman dance party in my living room. By the time I collapsed on the couch, sweaty and out of breath, I felt lighter, like I'd shaken off some of the sadness that had been clinging to me. The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Some days I felt invincible. I'd go to work with my head held high, laugh with my colleagues, make plans for the future. Other days, I could barely drag myself out of bed. The thought of facing the world, of pretending to be okay, was just too much. But you know what? I let myself feel it all. The good, the bad, the ugly crying sessions in the shower. Because that's what healing looks like. It's messy and it's painful, but it's real. One particularly low day, I found myself sitting on the floor of what used to be our home office, surrounded by photo albums. I'd been meaning to pack them away, but instead, I was flipping through them, torturing myself with images of happier times. There we were on our honeymoon, young and so in love. Michael and me at countless dinners, parties, vacations. His arm always around me, both of us smiling at the camera. God, we looked happy. Were we really? Or was it all just a beautiful lie? As I stared at a photo of us on our last anniversary, something inside me snapped. I was done. Done mourning the loss of a marriage that, in hindsight, had been broken for a long time. Done letting Michael's betrayal define me. I grabbed a trash bag and started throwing things in. Photos, knickknacks, all the little reminders of my life with Michael. It felt cathartic, like I was physically clearing out the old to make room for the new. By the time I was done, the room was almost empty. But instead of feeling sad, I felt excited. This wasn't just an empty room. It was a blank canvas, a space for me to fill with whatever I wanted. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was buzzing with possibilities. What did I want to do with my life? Who did I want to be, now that I wasn't Michael's wife? I thought about my job at the hospital. I loved being a nurse, loved helping people. But I'd always dreamed of doing more, of maybe going back to school, becoming a nurse practitioner. Before I could talk myself out of it, I opened my laptop and started researching programs. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. It would be hard work, juggling a full-time job and school. But I was ready for the challenge. The next few months were a whirlwind. I threw myself into work and study with equal passion. There were nights when I wanted to give up, when the stress of it all seemed too much. But then I'd remember how far I'd come, how strong I'd proven myself to be. And I'd keep going. My friends were amazing through it all. Lisa became my unofficial study buddy, quizzing me on medical terminology over wine and takeout. My colleagues at the hospital cheered me on, offering encouragement and advice. And Michael? Well, he tried to worm his way back in. There were late-night texts, pleading phone calls. "I made a mistake," he'd say. "I miss you. We can work this out." Each time, it got a little easier to say no, to remind myself that I deserved better, that I was building a life for myself, one that didn't have room for his lies and betrayal. The day I got my acceptance letter to the nurse practitioner program, I cried, but this time, they were happy tears. Tears of pride, of accomplishment, of hope for the future. I called Lisa first, her excited squeals making me laugh. Then my parents, who promised to come visit and celebrate. As I hung up the phone, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd stood in that hallway months ago, broken and lost. This woman was stronger, wiser, ready to take on the world. For a moment, I thought about calling Michael, about rubbing my success in his face, showing him what he'd lost. But then I realized I didn't need to. His approval, his regret, his anything. It didn't matter anymore. This was my victory, mine alone. That night, as I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future, about the life I was building for myself, the woman I was becoming. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I raised my glass in a silent toast to new beginnings, to second chances, to the beautiful, messy, wonderful journey of rediscovering myself. Watch out. World Sarah Thompson 2.0 is ready to take on whatever comes next. And this time, I'm doing it on my own terms. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, the universe decided to shake things up one more time. It was a typical Tuesday morning. I was rushing to get to my clinical rotation, juggling a travel mug of coffee and a stack of textbooks, when my phone buzzed. It was Lisa. "Sarah," she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. "You need to see this." She sent me a link to a local news article. As I clicked on it, I almost dropped my phone. There, splashed across the screen, was Michael's face. The headline read, "Local executive arrested in embezzlement scandal." I stood there, frozen in my driveway as I scanned the article. Apparently, Michael had been siphoning money from his company for years. The business trips he'd been taking. Many of them were covers for meetings with offshore accounts and shady investors. My mind was reeling. All those late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the sudden influx of cash he'd always attributed to good investments, it all made sense now. The affair wasn't his only secret. I don't know how I made it through my rotation that day. My mind kept drifting back to the article, to Michael's face in the mugshot. He looked old, tired, nothing like the confident, charming man I'd married. When I got home that evening, my phone was flooded with messages. Friends, family, even a few reporters looking for a comment. I ignored them all and poured myself a large glass of wine. As I sat on my couch, trying to process everything, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Shock, certainly. Anger, definitely. But also, relief. It was like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. The last bit of doubt I'd been harboring about ending my marriage vanished. The next few weeks were chaos. Michael's arrest was all anyone could talk about. At work, at school, even at the grocery store, I could feel people's eyes on me, hear their whispers. That's her, Michael Thompson's ex-wife. But you know what? I held my head high. I went to my classes, aced my exams, and threw myself into my clinical work. And slowly, the whispers died down. People moved on to the next bit of gossip. One day, about a month after the arrest, I received a letter. It was from Michael, sent from the county jail. My hands shook as I opened it. "Sarah," it began, "I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I need your help. My lawyer says if you testify on my behalf, it could reduce my sentence. Please, Sarah, I know I've hurt you, but we had good times too. Don't let them lock me away. I read the letter once, twice, 3 times. Then I calmly walked to the kitchen, pulled out a lighter, and set it on fire, watching as the flames consumed his pleading words. As I watched the last bits of paper turn to ash, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The last tie to my old life, to the woman I used to be, was gone. That night, I called Kate, my lawyer. I want to change my name, I told her. Go back to my maiden name. Can we start the process? Kate's voice was warm with understanding. Of course, Sarah. I'll get the paperwork started right away. The day I officially became Sarah Miller again was surprisingly anticlimactic. No fireworks, no dramatic reveals, just me in a judge's chambers, signing some papers. But as I walked out of the courthouse, I felt different, lighter, free. Life went on. I graduated from my nurse practitioner program with honors, got a job at a prestigious clinic, bought my own house, a cute little bungalow with a garden that I tended religiously. And Michael, well, last I heard, he was serving a 10-year sentence. Sometimes, when I'm watering my flowers or studying for a certification, I think about him, not with longing or regret, but with a kind of detached pity. He had it all: a good job, a loving wife, a comfortable life. And he threw it all away for what? Money, thrills, a younger woman? But mostly, I don't think about him at all. I'm too busy living my life, on my terms. It's funny looking back on it all. If you'd told me on that horrible night when I confronted Michael about his affair that in a few years I'd be happier than I'd ever been, I would have laughed in your face, or cried, probably both. But here I am, Dr. Sarah Miller, nurse practitioner, homeowner, garden enthusiast, dog mom to a rescue mutt named Max, happy whole. Last week, I ran into Jessica, the other woman, at the supermarket. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Then she looked away, her face flushed with shame, and hurried off. As I watched her go, I felt no anger, no resentment, just a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that pushed me to grow, for the betrayal that set me free. I finished my shopping and headed home to my little house with its blooming garden. As I pulled into the driveway, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and I realized something. This, all of this, was better than any revenge I could have planned. Living well, being happy, thriving, that was the best revenge of all. So here's to new beginnings, to second chances, to the beautiful mess that is life. Here's to falling down and getting back up, stronger than ever. And here's to me, Sarah Miller, no longer a victim, no longer a betrayed wife, just me. And you know what? That's more than enough.